Oh, this one might get me killed, won't it? Oh, come on. You act like this is the only time we've ever tackled somebody big. Racing means we've already dealt with our bully RC all the time. Yeah, and then there was that one person who kept doing all those freaking pony crossovers. But hey, this is a famous person, and fanfic wise, this person's got some interest. It's got a whole entire community based around them, and hey, they got fanfics. So hey, who knows? Maybe, just maybe, this might be really good. He said, feeling the ever-flowing realm of hatred coming his way. They watched, and they grew steadily more excited as they continued to stalk their prey. This has to be said. Most diamond dogs do not eat ponies immediately. Okay, nope. You're doing this. But they just had to say the freaking diamond dogs eat ponies. This is just as bad as that one time back for the ones we love. You're doing this. Yes, Luna. Like I say, she's a hard talker. And can't say something simply to consume is a waste of valuable resources. Flybear let the pony work itself to the point of death over several years, and then, once the labor pool loses a drop of its own, see what marinated sweat and despair has done for the flavor. Yeah, because I can still see these guys being the ones to eat their slaves. Is she got an S-tub? No. Even then, it's a rare treat. Even in their strongest days, before the hated diarchy, they did not allow their slaves to breed. The cries of the infants were too painful for them, and allowing adults time to raise the children was a loss that they could not bear. Then have them raise the babies in a separate room. Diamond dogs can typically plan into the next hour, and some of the brightest can make it into the next week. But seeing forward to the next generation requires a genius not seen in their species for several decades. Part of why they keep trying to kidnap ponies. The diarchy certainly wouldn't respond by the afternoon, and probably won't be here by tomorrow, and anything after that is of no concern. In fact, once the response does come, anything less capable of feeling concern tends to be minimal. They do not stockade future feasts while attempting to see how combining coat colors would prove the flavor. You know my problem with saying all this about them? These guys are diamond dogs. They're about as intimidating as a Ferengi. And a swap meet. Your car dealership. And they have an unlimited credit card. They simply waited through their eternal near now, and some waited more. No easy feat for a race historically so bad at weighing that their entire future exists in two states. Immediately is not soon enough, and hurry up already. But ponies were so hard to catch, and that waiting was actually easier. There's a diamond dog saying, which few outside their packs ever heard. It'll be done when the mane falls off. Representing a time period only shorter than forever, was the suffering canine must still endure. So they wait. Only a few of their breed in any generation claim to know the taste of pony meat, and most may be liars. Joining that honored pack is worth facing the endless chasm of time. But these diamond dogs, there were 5 of them, outcast from the mines together for an active theft, which seemed more brilliant than targeted gems for the hour they had planned through, were at that point considering a meal without gaining slave first. They were hungry. They had been away from their cage for immense duration, 8 days, and couldn't burrow back in without facing the threat of exile becoming death. And they'd been thrown out with maps or to the other warden runs. Not that they were able to read such witchery. They had not seen a mole or rabbit for the entire pressing way of First World Forevers. None of the local creatures were within their catching lure, and there were a few dead end, fully enclosed corners to chase things into. They hated the thing called weather. Hated even more than the parts named rain and wind, especially the latter, forever stealing scents and misleading them. It was windy today, becoming steadily more so as they stalked. They'd been lucky to see their pony rather than smelling her out. There had been no place of their own for the pony to dig through. At best, they'd be trying to keep it on the surface, the pony's world, an invitation to disaster, letting one stay under the watchful and loathed eyes of the sun and moon. The pony was there. It was meat. And it was hurt. You know, I've heard on TV tropes that this fic is supposed to be renowned for its realism. And I'll be getting to that in a few minutes. But, fic, if you wanted to be real, why not make the diamond dogs blind when they come out? It was hurt. The female, the most talented of the dogs, knew that much. He had seen ponies once from a great distance. It made him the expert, Wayne, and that made them soak the trails of drool into their bare vests, stripped of the gem as part of the exile. Steal from the pack, lose what the pack had granted. Winged and on the ground, whimpering slightly as they picked a path through the forest. They learned to hate the green place, learned quickly. But the ponies seemed as uncomfortable here as they were, and it spotted him behind the brown things which they could not dig through. Female, winged, but not flying. Perhaps not able to fly. The winged ones were the stuff of legend for diamond dogs, nearly impossible to catch, and just as hard to keep. Those with horns could do things to them which weren't understood, and those with neither wings nor horns, no, those legends weren't any of the five wanted to think about, especially since they didn't apply here. But the other two were on the ground, and the winged ones couldn't be reached. They stood in the clouds and laughed at the diamond dogs, sent rain and lightning down as the punchlines to their private jets. The canines resented those who did what they could not, and few more than the winged ones, who danced with the sun and moon far above places where diamond dogs lurk, and as every so often wondered what they were missing. Her coat was the soft tan of dried out surface dirt, garnet ground, and a sort blue mane and tail, sapphire low grade, only good for buckles, and deep purple eyes, fine as amethyst. They noticed the mark on his flank, but it meant nothing to them. Such a shape. Since it wasn't the shape of a weapon, it was no concern. The color is twisting, meaningless. The wings were off. The tips had some of the purple hue, visible because the ponies kept shaking them out from his body, moaning softly as it did so. Even to the diamond dog's eyes, the feathers seemed to be misaligned, not quite right, although that could have been due to the wind shaking them. They hated guts were still increasing in speed, and now the green leafy things were whipping them as they hid. The expert thought she was a bit larger than the females he had seen before, but it did not matter. For those large eyes were squinted in pain, or against the wind, which was really bad now, and the sound sad agony came whenever those wings moved, whenever hoof contacted the ground. Alone, hurt, and there were five of them. No amount of movement or scent confusing could change that fact. Was it flying? Couldn't fly. Easy prey. Exile didn't pay for the honor they were about to receive. The honor would take some of the sting away, at least for an hour. So they stalked, pushing forward against the wind which would not stop getting stronger, almost seeming to shove them back. But the brown things were also good for clinging to, and the pony still hadn't noticed them. So he was lost in a private torture. Plant a hoof, moan, move a wing, whimper, repeat. The wings were moving a little faster now, and the smallest diamond dog wondered if he might be able to fly. It was quieted quickly to keep the pony hearing them over the wind. This would have been difficult. There was a hunting howl coming from the air itself, inspirational. It told the exiles the strange world approved of their plan. Perhaps they were welcome here. Perhaps they would carve out a warren open to the once fearful sky. They stalked. They got into position to surround. Then they sprung out. The pony bucked, wings fully unfurled, but did not fly. Helpless, grounded, screaming something which they all dismissed. Of course it wanted them to stay back. Naturally, it didn't desire them to come any closer. Meat wanted to survive. It was only to be expected. Meat was always wrong. They closed in. The expert was watching the wings, still thinking about the concerns of the smallest. It had seen Pony fly at one time, and knew how the wings moved. These were moving, but not enough to get the pony into the air. It might have been the wind moving them. The wind net now howled like a diamond dog in its moment of greatest triumph. A diamond dog about to take a winged one. And then they received an even greater honor. The experts saw it first as it took shape. The narrow funnel at the bottom, the wide mouth at the top, the planer on the vest. On the pony's other side, spotted the second one forming, no more than 5 dig scoops tall. They tried to call each other, asked the pack to help figure out what was going on, but they could not hear anything but the movement of the air as it screamed at them. Shook the brown things and tore away the green things, sent all the little bits of meat flying away. The pony was saying something, and those words were shaken by the wind as well, but not the tears flowing from her eyes. Her coat, her mane and tail, her pain was untouched. Just before they were hurled away, a split second before the two of the pack suffered the impacts, was what eventually killed them. The exiled diamond dogs became the first of their species to exceed wind. The last thought of the expert just before he went to the largest of the brown things was a memory of his former pack's eldest, telling the best he could ever know about the hunting process. It just wasn't worth it. Somewhere, and sometime, in time, these would be the last words he saw before the world went white. A cutie mark cannot be spontaneously created. She had known that. There was no magic which would force a permanent one to appear from nothing. Even if the caster knew what the recipient's talent was and made a mark to suit, all it would buy them was the same result: a second of visibility, hours of exhaustion, and a night spent with a splitting headache. A cutie mark can be temporarily concealed, albeit with great effort. Another well-established fact: spells existed briefly to return the target to the youthful blank status, some more powerful than others. The best offensive one blocked the victimized pony's access to their special talent for a few precious seconds, made the splitting headache of the forced appearance spell into a fond lodging, when the time you only wanted to crawl into a hole and die was about to look the best part of your life. Mundane disguises tended to wear away quickly, as if vaporized by the mark's resentment. Paints, dyes, fur blending potions, a day at best. Only clothing worked long term, and most mares and stallions outside of Camelot and Main Hen didn't treat their wardrobe as an everyday thing, without matching the accent. Constant covers would seem quickly at best, and at worst extremely deliberate. Especially if the pony in question was fully dressed in the privacy of their own home with no one to show their latest style to. There had been a time in equestrian history when the sure sign of a criminal or spy was that any outfit was covered to flanks. Stop and search challenges had been hotly debated in courts at the time. Fashion had, according to some, suffered accordingly, although the resulting peekaboo string pull windows had apparently settled room for other uses. A cutie mark can be transferred, but only the mark itself moves, not the talent it represents. Something only a few ponies in the world were supposed to know, a fact that wasn't supposed to spread. A cutie mark can be delayed, sometimes independently, and the colors had begun to leach out of her visage edges. Sheer as abuse, to see what some ponies' talent would be and prevent them from practicing it, blocked them from accessing their deepest self. Consensus was better for them to remain blank their entire lives rather than be themselves. But it happened. Parents angry that their child wouldn't be following in their footsteps, desperate to stop the branch before it split into the main trunk. Always during the trials, they would say it was for their child's own good. The Destiny didn't know as much about as loving mother or father. As he would see the princess's eyes narrow as her mane flowed faster, and the faint sparks started to flare to something more. None of those ponies ever saw their children again. Some of them never saw the country again. And then the ones which made it all falsely go away, masked out the horrors of the life and whispered purrs to scream, were the last things understood before that flashpoint the joy and exuberance which went into the bold letters, that the stains of the parchment had come for tears of joy. A cutie mark can be manipulated. Yes, folks, that part was so serious it had to be bolted. Twilight Sparkle was flying, sort of. What she was mostly doing was feeling like the biggest idiot the alicorn subspecies, currently to the best of her knowledge, numbering at 4, had ever produced. A state that he had spent most of her post-transformation time in. Here's Twilight Sparkle, a princess of obsessive compulsive disorder. That's right, we have a princess for each for the sun, moon, love, now for unknown reasons, The universe has decided we need some point to exceptionalize the need to get up at 3 in the morning and make sure that 1 a.m. Reselling is still attached. Behold her as she does not even remotely majestically soar above the clouds, probably making sure each one has been molded into a regulated shape and trimming out the edges, whatever doesn't fit. She was sure at some point in the Camelot course was having a particular conversation, possibly even printing it under the name Gabby Guns Jr. She had a number of times, mostly with herself and twice with every patient Al had. To his credit, done his best to price it who as a counter argument to all the right places. None of which had convinced her of anything. Twilight flew. To be fair, she was in the air, and she was moving. It would be hard to call it flight. Certainly not in front of Rainbow Dash, who would have been falling out of clouds, trees, or whatever else was handy. I'll care about your feelings later, maybe not during sight. Twilight didn't understand flight. This mystified her. She understood aerodynamics better than most Pegasi, which inevitably offended them, so she happened to bring it up again. More of a grasp on telekinetic levitation, pun intended, should one happen to exist, than 99% of the unicorn race. Shortly before her transformation, she had been researching self-levitation, a trick accomplished by very few unicorns. She played the educational system. Unicorns were taught to let their natural magic flow forward and fully surround the object they wanted to lift. Letting it go backwards then became a twist of thinking most were unable to surmount. Only the youngest, who did not know any better and had a low blind rate to move anyway, did naturally. Any pony with even the most basic training wound up having a giant fundamental to unlearn. Somehow, none of that ended up to wing movement, resulting in smooth passage through the atmosphere. She had flown once, immediately after her coronation, when the joy had suppressed her to the point where it had to be expressed. She had resulted in her taking an aerial tour of the land around Camelot, while happily singing to herself about how everything was going to be fine. She'd done it without planning, without a checklist, without thought, and told herself, once she had landed, that she was going to be repeating the experience whenever she liked. She had been wrong. She was not flying, she was, well, call it randomly flailing in the air, with wings that seemed randomly to spark from her body, somehow resulting in semi-coherent bursts of movement going in a different direction, occasionally including down. It's a lot kinder than what Twilight was calling it. Falling with style? And now here she was at 5 in the morning, chosen under the certain knowledge that there was no way on the luminous waxing moon the Rainbow Dash would be awake to witness anything, over Ponyville, all over Ponyville, trying to keep a quasi-straight course, trying to go around the nighttime clouds, which Rainbow Dash was supposed to have cleared before the previous sunset, for fear of going into them. And when she did make the inevitable tumbling contact, finding herself going through. She was an alicorn, the best of the three main races. She wasn't sure how crystal ponies worked into it, and found a way to ask the princess yet, put together. Well, they could just be a subdivision of Earth ponies, so zoo exists, you know. Clouds were supposed to be solid for her. She was supposed to be able to manipulate the weather at her command, and she had tried. She reached out to them with her magic, found herself unable to move them, but that was nothing. Rarity had been able to do as much under the influence of Star Swirl's spell. She couldn't trigger rain or lightning on command any more than Rarity had been able to. Although some of the results from her fumbles had gone into the Everfree, and earned her a stinging 20-minute lecture from Sakura, all in iambic pentameter. She couldn't physically touch the clouds without her standard vapor walking spell. She would try to control her levitation factor, balance out the pressure that she had put herself against the ground below her, and use the field for the last minute stage before crashing to Barry Punch's relocated home. She considered everything she knew from physics and thermometry and throw it all together. But she couldn't fly. Not more than once. She didn't know how she'd done it back then. Had been paying enough attention to analyze and replicate. Something else he had been able to ask the princess about. One more question on an ever-increasing list. Pardon me, but how exactly do you keep from plummeting every cloud you land on? Any hints? Maybe, I don't know, a manual? Or is this something that takes 1,000 years to master? Her mind didn't notice the last sentence. Her body went to City Hall, to what the bell rang at the very top. Her head rang. Bell chorused nicely. Lights began to come on all over Ponyville as the citizens decided to take a quick look at the latest disaster before running away from it. Those who peeked outside saw a faintly vibrating bell humming to itself in the fast fading night, as the first of Celestia's twice daily command performances. sent a glint of glow across the horizon. None of them saw the sucking purple alicorn making her sunny away back towards the library, on hoof. So he needed to figure out how to fly. This was the least of it, a symptom, better than the first thing on the checklist. Once he got that right, everything else would fall into place. It had to. Everything was not fine, as he had no idea to fix it. Ask Rainbow Dash for lessons? Read a book? Practice with short little hops once in a while? I mean, it's not that hard. I'm a Pegasus. I do that all the time. Quiet Presence had been ringing for most of the night. A new couch, full length to allow his body to spread out. None of this sitting fat that some of the fillies were carling about. Beautifully padded, imported by Pegasi couriers at the great expense, and nearly dropped into his coin pond. Came with a dozen sample quills for Luna knew what reason. Had proved immediately addictive. He had luxurious stretched across its length, levitated his chosen track into the built-in holder, and allowed his field to flick across the pages at need. The track was a mere 300 years old. Quiet Presence liked to think of himself as some pony who was open to newfangled ideas. If you were to describe Quiet Presence, well, there's a challenge, really. There are ponies whose coats and marks display bright colors and shapes, energetic ponies whose presence seems to be barely ground-bound, and a third is simply arid. You have everyday citizens who stand out in their way, to the point where you almost seem to be spotting them everywhere you go. Then you had Quiet Presence, who is, and that's about all you can say for him. Ponies generally looked at him as the very interesting was on the other side, and after a few seconds, most of them started to see it. About all most ponies managed to retain was, I think there was a unicorn, and that was accurate, of course. His family was proud of their unicorn heritage, generation after generation, without openly mixing their blood. He was honored by his horn, and all it represented, the purity of it. The visible purity, anyway. But to say what he looked like, physically, he was the second newest thing in the room after the couch. There had been a tremendous fight with his spouse over buying something made in this century. He had a horn of standard issue. Certainly he was a stallion, even if his build didn't fully reflect his gender. His coat seemed to blend against the gray stone walls of the family castle, and render them into a blinking part of the landscape if he stood out long enough. But he frequently did, and his key mark was barely there. The subconscious will register that he had one, but making out the exact shape required a long inspection. Several go-overs to make sure nothing had moved while you weren't looking. Which was ridiculous, of course. Cutie marks didn't move, but I gave off the same impression he did, on the rare occasion he made any at all, that the whole thing could just fade away at any moment, and no pony would care. Even his field was colorless. The only indication of its presence was tiny wrinkles at the corner of each page. He flipped the parchment over, read another paragraph, took a moment to ponder the words he had been dozens of times before. They still confused him. Warnings about the powerless. Well, the author was widely believed to be mad, but I was all the more reason to examine her words. Insanity had a way of finding insights that were sane did not dare to glimpse. Clearly not this particular passage, but here and there, just not here and now. Another page. There was a knocking sound, perilously close to his right ear. He did not jump. He was not persistent for it, and jumping showed a certain lack of reserve. Instead, he turned his head slowly to the right until he was looking directly at the table land, prying into bands of shadows which would otherwise accumulate near a book's spine. It was now hovering in precise 3 inches towards the marble surface, surrounded by the steady silver glow. It went back to the table level. The base knocked against the stone up and down 3 times, returned to hovering. Quiet Presence took a long, slow look toward his study. There were bookshelves, lamps, extra couches for when he had guests, serving tables for snacks and books which had yet to be resolved. What there was not a single window, in part because they were rather pointless when your favorite reading space happened to be underground. When your rulers had control of the sky and so in a more personal library could be considered a bit controversial, you got into a habit of building enclosed spaces. His ancestors had spent centuries perfecting the craft. Decorating had been most of it. Thus, this century riff. Back to the lantern. The silver glow held it without even a hair's worth of shift. There was a sparkle in it. Carefully so not to pull out any fragile muscles. Quiet Presence got off the couch and slowly trotted up the passageway toward the main castle, making sure not to notice all the proper things was field along the way. The lantern remained behind, still glowing. Every so often it knocked again. Eventually, he reached the door and opened it, and let sincerely impressed politeness service of a mean ambassador. No line of sight, he told his honored guest. Move over more than 80 paces in the most direct angle. Purely off your memory. I would replace the lantern if I was in the room this hour. No, well, I could just learn that trick. His visitor's muzzle hit quite Prez's shoulder. Soot was dislodged on impact. The rest of his greeting was put aside indefinitely. It took time to care to bring the older stallion to the castle's open passage without being seen. They were able to move somewhat faster once they had reached the concealed travelways, but they were still restricted by that hobbled movement, that horrible dragging right hind leg, and quiet presence of the weakness of his body. He could barely take the weight of his companion, barely withstand his own days. Not broken. His visitor rasped out, coughing out more black dust from each word. Just pulled through the fire and thorns. Easy. First friend, the younger stallion told his guest, trying to keep his burdened voice steady. We're almost there. I can have help within the hour. Private help. Those who would speak of this in no point except each other. It's the other stallion that came here instead of a hospital. A head shake and more black coals staining the stone. I need rest more than anything else. A sigh. She's not here. I know that now. I told her to come to you should anything happen, but... Quiet Presence blinked. For a moment, there seemed to be but a single stallion in the dim passage, leaning against nothing. I haven't seen her. He had seen her all at once. He hadn't enjoyed it. He understood, certainly, the share the pain and regret, but... No, you recalled to me, but I had to be sure. A few more paces. I think she teleported. I couldn't stay behind. Not for more than a few minutes, and even that was a risk. But the tang in the air. No time to analyze it. It had to be a teleport. Quiet Presence moved, but concernedly, bracing the older stallion so his injured elder would not fall at the loss of his support before switching position to face it directly. He had to be eye to eye for this. Had to be. A teleport. Yes, sir. He cut himself off. Of course, yes, sir. You wouldn't be here if you wouldn't. Each one more excited than the last. Still soft, while all you need for secrecy keeping them from becoming full shouts. The sheer rapture threatening to erupt them in form of decibels. It worked? The older stallion said no and yes. It was a statement. Most of the things he ever said were statements. Few questions which weren't rhetorical. Self-doubt or the teleport as much as he ever expressed. Simple plain words. I said this, therefore it is true. If you don't understand it, maybe it's because it's true you don't understand it. It was stated for him, and it was done. Younger again, gone black. I don't understand. I will, came the reply. Another statement. With rest, we're closer. So much closer. We may even be there, but I need rest. Quiet Presence understood that nothing would come without rest. Took some of his elders' way again, helped him move towards the hidden bed nestled between the emergency supplies. But he was wrong. 3 more words came, all tinged with amazement, awe, and perhaps just a hint of weary satisfaction. It was beautiful. Stated, therefore true.